Good morning. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. Going to call our meeting to order. A couple of things. Meeting documents, a lot of the stuff we reference are on the end by Commissioner Heiberger. They're also available in the County Auditor's Office, Public Records. If you have a cell phone on you, you may want to silence it to avoid embarrassment. And if you need a listening device, see one of our Commission staff. They can help you out. Call our meeting to order and look for a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Barth, a second by Heiberger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We also have meeting minutes. Look for approval for August 24th, 2021 for the County Commission meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And look for another motion for the joint meeting for the Minnehaha County and City Sioux Falls.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Bills to be paid, $1,483,383.62.
Pay the bills.
Motion by Barth, second by Heiberger. Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. We have a couple reports, the Minnehaha County Coroner report and the Planning Department Building Permits report for August of 2021. Interesting data on our building permits and how much those are up, so if you like that stuff, good read. Personnel actions. We look for a motion to approve routine personnel actions.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We also have significant employee anniversaries. Congratulations, Carrie.
Thank you. Short list this month, but 35 years of service between myself and Adam Nelson at the museum, who is celebrating 20 of those years. The next item we have for you is to recognize or record our county volunteers for August 2021. 194 people serving 8 departments of the county. That's over half of our departments really that are being served by volunteers, so we're very grateful for their service. And then the last item I have is a special personnel action to approve the hire of Rhonda Hedrick as the paralegal for the state's attorney's office at $26.70, effective September 20th. This is slightly above our authorized hiring range. In this case, a paralegal requires a 2-year degree, and Rhonda has over 20 years of service as a paralegal for another county, so very directly relevant experience.
Move for approval? Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you,
Yep.
Carrie. And again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Notice and request, the DANR notice of reissuance of solid waste general permits. Again, it's just a notice, no action required. We have planning and zoning notices. We have a first reading and authorize the auditor to publish notice of hearing on September 28th, 2021 at 5 p.m. to consider Ordinance MC 304321, amending the revised joint zoning ordinance MC 30-02 for Minnehaha County and the city of Sioux Falls. What does that all mean, Scott?
Thank you. Scott Anderson, Planning Director, and we're going to be setting a number of hearings, all on similar actions, but for various zoning ordinances that we have. The first one that I'm asking you to authorize the auditor to publish is a hearing notice to amend the joint zoning ordinance for the city of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. And this would be an action to create a definition for dispensary. It would also make medical cannabis dispensary as a permitted special use in the C commercial and I-1 light industrial district. This is, we're all aware, this is something that's on the horizon for the state of South Dakota as well. The state's working on this. And just to give everyone at home a little bit of a background, in July, there was a task force that was made up of local elected officials and some administration from various entities, the city of Sioux Falls, various mayors, the county, our county, Lincoln County, And as a result of the work that came out of that task force, what were recommendations on the proposed ordinance. An ordinance was drafted, it was presented to the task force, and they generally approved of it. This is an ordinance that's very similar to what the city of Sioux Falls is adopting and what Lincoln County's adopted. It has been to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, and it was approved at the Planning Commission. So now I'm bringing this forth to you to have a public hearing, which would be September 28th at 5 p.m. at Carnegie Town Hall. And this would be a joint hearing with the city of Sioux Falls. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. And if it's approved, we would move on to a hearing on the 28th at 5 p.m.
So this just outlines the changes to the zoning ordinance. Later on, we'll be discussing the specifics of medical cannabis.
Yes, that's a good point. So this only regulates the land use. So it's going to identify zones that the use can occur in, and it's going to set up a definition. So subsequently today, you will be looking at an ordinance that will address the licensing. That's going to be more nuts and bolts on how many licenses you're going to grant, the costs for them, the renewal process, the application process. That's all going to be wrapped up and identified in that subsequent ordinance that you're going to be setting a hearing today for.
Okay, okay. Are A, B, and C all very closely related?
They're all very closely related. I would dare say almost identical, other than there's some difference in the dates and the ordinance numbers, but we do have to take them in separate actions, I believe.
Okay, we will.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Commissioner Eberger?
Just a comment of, I think, clarification, and I might have this wrong, I don't think I do, that we're not setting the fee structure today, that we'll be setting that in the future. Am I wrong or right on that? That was a question I had this weekend, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for purposes of these three issues, there are no numerical numbers being set, whether fees or licenses, so the other discussion will come up a little bit later in the agenda.
Okay.
Other comments? So this is to set a public hearing date for September 28th. One will be here, ours alone. One will be here with Del Rapids, and one will be at Carnegie with the city of Sioux Falls.
Exactly.
All three on the same date, but different entities involved. Okay?
Yes.
So I'll look for a motion to set that notice of hearing for September 28th for MC 304321.
Make a motion to authorize the auditor to publish notice.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. And then look for the same thing for MC 16-171-2021.
This is,
Cindy's
just for
motion.
clarification, this is for the county, just the county zoning ordinance, so.
The previous one was for the joint with Sioux Falls.
Yes.
This one's for the
So-
county alone.
Yes,
Yep.
and this one will be at 9 a.m. on the 28th.
All right.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. And the last one's with Del Rapids.
Yes.
Motion to approve.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Scott.
I just would comment that Del Rapids was tardy in showing up to that meeting when the planning commissions met. And we need to make sure that they show up for our joint meeting. Otherwise, we might be waiting till the afternoon.
Point made, Commissioner.
Wish I was
Petition for
joking.
compromise, a lien, we have none. This is the opportunity for public comment. Anybody here for public comment for a non-agenda item? I know we do have a new reporter from the Argus Leader here. If you want to wave or say aye. Nicole, welcome. All righty. Moving on to regular business. Public hearing to consider a special event on-sale liquor license for Prairie Pasta Incorporated, DBA Johnny Carinos, for an event on September 25th, 2021.
Rhonda Bennett, Deputy Auditor. Johnny Carinos is catering an event at the Baltic Event Center on September 25th, and they have paid their application and filled out their application, and they would just ask for approval.
For a motion?
So
Public
moved,
It's a
Benega.
public hearing, just to ask for.
Oh,
Yeah, just ask for, no, you did fine.
anybody here for proponents for this? Anybody here opposed? Okay, now I'll look for a motion in a second.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Benega, second by Heiberger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Commissioner. Reading for an ordinance establishing the licensing and regulation of medical cannabis dispensaries in Minnehaha County, and we will have our Chief Civil Attorney, Mr. Bogue, address us on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Bogue, State's Attorney's Office. As previously mentioned, this is the second part of the IM26 county action that you'll be taking today. This is the licensing and regulatory ordinance that we've discussed several times in the past. There are a few blanks in this for first reading. Normally, we don't have a whole lot of discussion, but I do need some direction for final drafting. If you'll look at the copies that you have either electronically or in paper in front of you, on page 2 is a blank that we do need to fill in for the number of licenses that you wish to issue. Now, I have drafted this per past indications from all of you that we will be doing dispensaries only, not the other 3 kinds of licensing. So if I've drafted that in error, that's an easy fix. But we'll still need the numerical number for the number of dispensaries that you want. If you look then continuing on into the draft ordinance on page 5, that's a more mechanical nuts and bolts question that you'll need to direct me on how to fill that in and which office you want the applications going to. I know he's here, he can defend himself, but I'm assuming the auditor's office is probably where these will go. If he'd prefer not to have those, he can certainly speak up and object. But I didn't want to assume that that's where you want them to land. Also, likewise, same really question on page 7. There's 2 different blanks. Again, the auditor can take action or his designee. If that's, again, I'm presuming a little bit that that's the office that you want those to go to. Now, finally, the somewhat of a drafting question, but also as to where this would land on page 8, section 5. There can be some presumptive or initial revocation action taken if you want to designate that, again, somewhat assuming that that would be the auditor's office. We can certainly take some of those provisions out if you wish, but I didn't want to, again, presume to know which office that you wanted that to go to if you want to take that type of initial revocation proceeding. With that, there's a lot in here. I don't know how much you want to discuss this morning. As Scott Anderson mentioned before, this is the nuts and bolts, the mechanics of how you will license medical marijuana or medical cannabis in Minnehaha County. Again, this is outside the municipal boundaries of the various municipalities in Minnehaha County. So this will not reach in to regulate what happens within those municipalities, just in the unincorporated areas of the county.
Okay, so a couple of issues we should discuss. Commissioner?
I have one question before we start, and that's on that section 5, the one about revoking or suspending licenses. Right now, is it the commission that revokes or suspends alcohol licenses? And so that would be a consideration that I would throw out there instead of the auditor's office. If somebody's license is going to be revoked, at least they could come to the commission with concerns instead of having to stand downstairs and argue with the auditor. It would be a public setting instead of the auditor's office being. So it would just be a suggestion.
I'm along the same thought process there. I mean, it's an individual in the auditor's office has the authority to suspend, but I would think that this body, being the elected quasi-judicial arm of, would have the final authority on upholding that or not.
Final decision.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair, if I could interject a comment. The way it's drafted right now, you can certainly insert county commission rather than county auditor or county treasurer in that line. So the blank can still be filled in appropriately if you prefer to keep that authority just with the 5 of you rather than one of the other offices.
Would it,
Please.
would it be that recommendations from the auditor's office, if the auditor's office is the one that we fill in the blanks ahead of time, you know, with the recommendation of whoever those other blanks are, the county commissioner would take the final.
No, I'm reading it the
Commissioner
same
Barth
way.
had-
I think we're on the
Commissioner
same
Barth had a
thought.
comment.
Commissioner Barth?
Can we suspend liquor and beer licenses? It seems to me that we used to be able to, but now we can only recommend to the Department of Revenue.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
Commissioner Barth is correct. Actually, all you can do is recommend a revocation. Finally, the state of South Dakota takes that final action upon recommendation from the issuing jurisdiction.
So we don't have anything from the State Department of Health on this yet. Would this be along the same lines then?
Mr. Chair, interesting point. I did just receive some updated or revised Department of Health rules just this morning, so we'll digest those a little bit more as the day goes along. The first part of your meeting went a little bit faster than my reading skills permitted, so I did just receive those as I walked into the office this morning from Yvonne Taylor. So she had even included any line-by-line blow as to how those changes would impact things, but we'll see how that results. But right now, I believe that because you can't operate with just a county license, you also cannot operate with just a state license. You have to have both. There's going to be some interaction between the state and the issuing county or municipality.
So is it fair to say then that this is kind of the rough draft of getting us started and we can modify it if we need to?
Well, the substantial alteration rule that applies to municipalities doesn't technically apply to counties. I prefer to operate in a realm that it does. So if you make substantial alterations to this, none of which I believe our conversation up to this point would include substantial alterations, but if they do result in substantial alterations, then we would be required to have an additional reading, because what you would present for second reading after today would be a much different version of a draft ordinance than what we're discussing this morning. But right now, we're talking about filling in blanks that are already present, very clearly designated on the presentation this morning. None of those are substantial.
I guess my thought is, you know, the check and balance, if we put the auditor in those blanks, that's, you know, the check, where the balance between the two, you know, what would our role be in determining the continuation of that suspension of a license?
Mr. Chair, if I could, if I'm grasping the intent of the commission at this point, if we were to fill in on page 8 the county commission instead of county auditor upon recommendation from the county auditor, again, that's not, in my view, a substantial alteration to the draft at this point, because retaining that authority to yourselves is essentially a given. Delegating it to somebody else upon recommendations from some other entity would be more of a deviation from this current draft. So,
Other commission input?
Go ahead.
Commissioner Barth?
Well, I was going to ask if the city has more definitive power on suspending alcohol licenses than we do, or do they also just recommend? And as I think about it here, you know, let's say an alcohol joint was selling underage, gets caught. 7 days later, the county commission meets and decides that they've been naughty, and we vote to recommend suspending their license. That goes to peer, and 3 weeks later they look at it and they decide that, well, there's only one more week left in the calendar year, we're not going to do it. It seems very cumbersome. I mean, you know, when you're in a baseball game, you want to know if they're safe or out, a ball or a strike, and you need to know quickly. And I just don't see this as operating as quickly as I would like it to operate. So does the city, are they able to suspend an alcohol license?
no, they have the same regulatory authority that the county has.
That alcohol lobby is pretty strong.
Well, and it all came back from years ago when I was first elected. We could do that, and we did. And I know that in Del Rapids, they suspended a gas station from selling beer. They went to court and they put a stay on it. And 10 months later, the next year started, and they never quit selling beer.
Commissioner Benega.
I just want to make sure I understand this process, because it seems like it's a floating buoy at some, excuse me, got a little bit of congestion today. But anyway, so we're doing a draft today in all practical purposes. In 2 weeks, we'll do a finalized, and then the legislature sometime this fall will review everything we've done and potentially change it again.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Benega, I think at this point, as we all knew when we started this process earlier this year, we knew that the state's rulemaking process was going to be the 300-pound gorilla in the room that we were going to need to be aware of. We won't know what those rules are until they're official and final. At this point, they're not official, nor are they final. So there is some possibility that whatever we enact as an ordinance, and that's true for all the municipalities and counties that have already finalized their local ordinance process, will need to change or amend something in those ordinances. So this is not the 10 Commandments. It's not being carved in granite. So nothing in this process cannot be or is prohibited from being altered in the future. Having said that, I would also point out for some other comments that you've all made, I already know that several legislators, several legislative groups, and various law enforcement groups are also initiating their lobbying efforts right now to make relative changes. I'll just call them that at this point, because I don't think substantive changes is probably going to happen, but legislation will come this next legislative session that will change or massage, if you will, IM26 in various different directions. So the playing field will change. That's almost certain. But at this point, I would consider this something more than a draft. This is a first reading as it's labeled on your agenda. I'm just at this point asking you to fill in some blanks. If you, on the other hand, find you substantially don't like significant parts of this or any single significant part of this, I probably at that point would recommend that you have a third reading rather than just a normal 2.
I think right now, getting back down to the third blank, which probably is the easiest one, is what authority does this commission have over the revocation or suspension of a license? And if we could add or insert some language into the ordinance that, if we could do that without having to go to a third reading, would be nice.
Mr. Again, if I'm understanding the direction of the commission correctly, I think what you're asking for on section 5A would be to insert the word commission. The county commission would have the authority to revoke, and then the only additional language would be upon recommendation from the county auditor.
Please, I think that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Because if it ends up changing state law, we'll just change it. And if the state decides that they're going to do it, then it takes it away from us. If the state decides they're not going to do it, we still have power. So I think it's a good way to go.
yep, okay, let's do that. So now let's get down to the meat here, and let's talk about numbers. I personally think that the county should have somewhere between 3 and 5 licenses, but I'm going to just throw that out there as a starting point and look for comments from my peers.
I'll start it and hope we get somewhere. The city of Sioux Falls has landed on the number 5, which 5 is 1 per about 35,000 people. In rural Minnehaha County, unincorporated, we have less than 18,000 people. Every one of those people can go to a pharmacy in their local community, which is within a few miles of them. There's going to be a dispensary in Hartford, in Humboldt, in Colton, in Del Rapids, in Garrettson, Brandon, wherever I missed a town. Everybody can go and get a gallon of milk. They can get their prescription medications in a community that's close to them. With us having a population of less than 18,000 people, The city of Sioux Falls sitting theirs at one dispensary per 35,000. I think we are justified and have something to stand on to say one dispensary in Minnehaha County at this point is plenty. That doesn't mean we can't revise it 6 months or a year down the road and say, yep, we made a mistake, we maybe need 2 or 3. But our task force recommended 1, and that's where I'm standing, is that I think we start slow and move forward. I don't think there's going to be 600 people running to try to put dispensaries in Minnehaha County, particularly the rural county, since there's going to already be one within probably 8 to 10 miles of everybody's home or less.
So we're between 1 and 5. Additional comments?
Mr. Chair, Cindy makes a good argument for this, using the population. However, it doesn't include the area, and the difference between Wellington Township and Red Rock Township is quite large. And I don't think there's going to be 600 people want this. I think we should go between 10 and 20, and if it's $100,000 a person and 20 people buy licenses, that's $2 million. And we could hire another person to actually oversee the operation, which I think we are going to need to do anyway. I don't think putting it just on the auditor is, or the weed board in the highway superintendent's office. I think that, if we don't sell them all, fine. And if we sell them all and they go broke, that's not our problem.
Commissioner Benninga.
Well, I was on that task force also, and there's been lots of conversation about the cost of issuing licenses and how we can generate revenue, but nobody ever wants to talk about the specific health-related public safety. Frankly, the black market concerns, the cost of what we're going to have to do as a county for everything that we're responsible for. So I'm going to stick with the recommendation that we issue 1 based on the population.
So we're between 1 and 20. We can always go up, but it would be very difficult to go down. And again, knowing that, as Mr. Bogue has indicated, that there's probably going to be a slew of changes that come forward from the state. Right now, we're just kind of setting the groundwork, and I prefer to keep it low myself. So I would support 1 just to get this moving forward, and based on the recommendation of the task force. Again, the cost. If we have 20 out there and we got burglar alarms going off in rural Minnehaha County at dispensaries because they're being broken into, our sheriff's department having to run to these places is going to get expensive and going to be time consuming for law enforcement. These dispensaries deal a lot in cash, and they have a very desirable item that wants to be stolen or people want to steal. So just to get it moving and to get ourselves an ordinance, I would be in favor of with the 1 number. So, Commissioner, I think you're on the,
$2 million, we can hire 3 more deputies.
Understand.
We also will have multiple fire calls, police calls, arrest kids that aren't covered because they are frankly assuming that the medical marijuana issue is similar to eating gummy bears, which is what's happened in Colorado. 300% emergency calls, 300% in ER calls and ICU stays. I can't justify increasing it by that much. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, Gerald brings up a good point, but children are shot by their parents' guns, they eat their parents' Advil, and since the invention of detergent pods, poisoning from them has increased infinitely. What's our tax on detergent pods? I mean, life comes with risk. Protect your child. Don't let them eat your Advil. Don't let them eat your opioids. Don't let them drink your coffee, your whiskey, and don't let them drive a car until they have a license. You know, we can't, there's no license required for parenthood, but maybe $100,000 would be a nice number for that. Think how much money we'd bring in that way. Anyway, I certainly believe that, Gerald, you have a good point. Cindy, you have a good point. I'm not in agreement, and I believe I'm right. So do you.
And we all have strong opinions, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think it's important for the public to know where we all stand individually, so thank you for that also. One it is, from what I'm hearing. And now moving on, I think Auditor is the most logical place for the licensing to go to, but I'd like to hear from Ben if he has some opposition to that.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I guess my desire would be to keep it consistent with how we handle other licenses, whether it's alcohol or whatever. I think that would just serve the county in the best process, right? So we have a consistent process.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a yes. And then the money issue, what page is that on?
It's not.
It's not.
Sure.
Okay.
And thank you. I wanted to make a point of that earlier, and I got lost in the weeds, so to speak. So let me address that. The point on the fees, there's 3 different fees in this draft ordinance that you are having first reading today. There's an application fee, there is a license fee, and there's a renewal fee. The fees, all 3 of those, the way this is drafted, will be set by separate resolution, very similar to what we did with the alcohol ordinance that we did earlier this year. So that, by resolution, can be amended much easier with a single reading than an ordinance change would be. So I went with that methodology on this as well. So you're not being asked this morning to set any numerical number. You certainly can have as much conversation as you wish. It's topical to this discussion this morning, but no finalization is being asked from me anyway at this point. So because that can be done on a single reading, we can do that all at the next hearing when we do the second reading on the licensing and regulatory ordinance itself. At that point, then we can also have the resolution in which you will set the fees. I would appreciate actually the conversation this morning, to be real honest with you, just so I know generally at least how to draft that and have that presented to you at the next meeting.
Okay. Did the task force address this issue?
I would say briefly. I guess my personal opinion is that if the city sets theirs at $100,000, I don't want them to just go outside of the city limits and be able to do it for half of that. So I would recommend that our fee is the same as the city's.
I have a couple questions. One is I agree. I don't want them setting it. I would have set it for way higher, but I know I'm never going to get anywhere on it. On the application part, one of the recommendations from the industry themselves said to put some type of, I don't remember exactly how they put it. They said to put the application fee really high or something, but it was a way to restrict one entity from putting 50 applications in and being cumbersome from the county to have to process all these applications for one specific person. Do you remember? I don't remember if it was by raising the application fee. I don't remember, Mr. Bogue, if you remember that conversation. I just don't want to see our auditor's office being encumbered by a whole bunch of the same applications from a person because, and maybe it's because, maybe you make the application higher, and then you also said that only an entity could apply for one specific location and one specific, I don't know exactly how, but that was a discussion.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Heber, I believe some of those concerns are somewhat mitigated by the fact that you are only issuing one license. So to have multiple applications for in this case, well, comparison to Sioux Falls, if you had 5 applications from one entity trying to get all 5, that would be a different situation than what we're having here. So there are similarities in some ordinance schemes that I've seen across South Dakota where you can limit or deny applications if issuance to one single entity would create a majority ownership in that one entity by granting any more applications to that single entity. If I'm making that clear, I may have crossed my own path there, but the point being, where there's only one, I think that a lot of that is mitigated, so.
Okay.
So one individual can't submit multiple applications, is that?
Well, until such time, and I'm just keying off your own comments, Commissioner Karski, that if you expand the number of available licenses, and at which point then you would have the ability for someone to apply multiple times for those multiple licenses, we may want to put some additional safeguards into place to prohibit that majority single ownership, for example, from occurring. But at this point, you're discussing or likely to adopt a single license. So whether or not you get multiple applications from a single entity makes really no difference, because they're only going to get one. Whoever's going to get it at this point is only going to get one.
But you're increasing your odds of, in the drawing, and I'm assuming we're going to have a lottery for that application, because we will probably have numerous applicants.
There is a lottery mechanism in place for the initial round, and also in somewhat planning for that possibility if you do expand the number, or in this case, if you'd come in with a higher number to start. So
Everybody's allowed one application.
right, and then there's a random draw to place them in order, and assuming that everything that's in there that's required to be there is there for the first drawn applicant, then that person theoretically would be the one that gets the issued license.
Commissioner?
Back on the fee structure, thank you for your answer. More of a point of clarification or a point of interest for our viewing public, and that is that the county gets no sales tax on marijuana, and so the only money that we receive, and we are all aware of that, is the application fee and the license fee and the renewal fee that we'll get to pay for law enforcement or human services or anything else that ends up being connected with this. So $100,000 is not going to go very far in the law enforcement side, hardly at all. And that's why I would have said way higher, but obviously you have to go along with what we have consensus for in our group. And just wanted to make that point for people who are listening, that we don't get anything other than this money to cover all the costs.
Law enforcement, and et cetera, et cetera. Yep. Commissioner?
You know, excellent point, Cindy, and that's why I also would like to have more licenses sold, so that we do bring in more revenue. I think that, you know, the losing applicants are not going to be happy, and they'll find some way to take us to court and deplete our alcohol fund, which is zero. By having too small of a number, I believe that we are bringing on additional litigation, which will cost us more money. The A&N issues, the law enforcement issues are certainly of interest. That said, I think that, you know, let me ask you this, Mr. Bogue. What about lesser than revocation of a, can we fine them? Can we suspend them? Do we have to either have it or not have it?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Barth, I think at this point the draft is designed more to you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, there are two different kinds of don't. One is a complete revocation, and one may be a suspension. So that's the mechanism in place right now. Should we feel that some kind of fine, there are Class 2 misdemeanor provisions in here that if they violate those, they can be charged, but that takes them over into the criminal aspect of things rather than in necessarily just a civil regulatory type fine. I do, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, want to remind you that there are three different fees. One is an application fee, which in theory is designed to cover the costs of your investigation and make sure they're an appropriate applicant, that the placement and site of that license would be appropriate as well. So it's all the mechanics up front, those costs that you want to make sure that you cover. That application fee is not refundable. So I'm not trying to set a number, but in theory, that's probably going to be a lower number than the actual license fee itself. The license fee itself, once you start that business running, I think would cover some of the issues that Commissioner Heiberger had mentioned before as to the social and law enforcement costs that could go with this particular product. The renewal fee, whether you wish that to be the same as the actual initial license fee or not, that's again a conversation for all of you to have, but again, that's the third fee.
So through the mechanics of this, the application fee, whatever we decide, and we're not deciding that today, but we're just looking for guidance
Right.
for you. They have to have a location, again, working through the mechanics. So if they submit an application, they have to say this is where, and these are the people, and there's background checks, and there's numerous other hoops that have to be done, so that if they're one of 10 people that want the one location that we're permitting, they have to have all their ducks in a row so that if they're approved, and we could have numerous applicants for that one, and a very time-consuming process done by the auditor's office with verifying all the information that's on there because of all the requirements that are set forth in statute.
Absolutely, and without diminishing the auditor's role in this, I would certainly say there's a law enforcement component as well to make sure that we're investigating the appropriateness of the applicant. So there are background checks that would end up going through the sheriff's office as well, at least at some level. So there's certainly county involvement to make sure that each application is appropriate. And again, the lottery mechanism only allows you to place in line based on draw and the completeness of your application. So they have to make sure, or we would have to make sure that everything that needs to be there is there. And that list, if you will look, is in section 3. There is, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, a laundry list of things that they have to have in their application, and that all has to be complete.
Okay. Commissioner?
We're not making a decision today, so I think it would be good to know for sure what the city of Sioux Falls is doing. And we've got a couple weeks to look at, other entities and what they're looking at. I know the paper that you write for, that Dave writes for, had an article this last week about Crooks, I believe it was you guys, Crooks and Humboldt, what they were looking at. And so there's some information out there too to kind of look and see what's going on, but mindful of the expenses that we have, and they're getting tax revenue and we're not, so.
Commissioner?
Cindy brought up a good point about us not getting any revenue. I spoke to a county commissioner from Colorado. Her county gets no revenue from it, but they grow it there. And in Colorado, it's only taxed at the place that they test it or at the place where it's sold. And they grow it in her county, but they don't test it there. They test it in Denver and Aspen or something like that. And of course, then there's a sales tax or whatever on it. And I see on page 2 here, section 2, item 2.2, we're not going to allow it to be grown here. We're not going to allow it to be tested here. Are we against people going into business? Are we opposed to value-added agriculture? Do we want to cancel the vote of the people of South Dakota? I think we should allow testing. We should allow growing, perhaps indoors or whatever, but if we preclude it, that means it'll be done somewhere else. And that means those people will get the money. Do we want it to be in Minnesota? Do we want it to be in Iowa? They have better soil in some places, but none better than Minnehaha County. And again, if you take corn and make whiskey, you've got value added. That's the same thing with this. And testing is such an important part, because one advantage of government-regulated marijuana is that, just like with cigarettes, you know what the tar and nicotine is. With stuff off the street, it might be laced with fentanyl or Roundup. And so I think that we should allow testing. We should encourage testing. And that growing it, what does farmland become worth if you can grow 10 acres of high-quality product easily converted into value-added? That's my thoughts.
Appreciate that, Commissioner. I believe by state statute, or by the statute that was passed by the public vote, if you don't allow the sale, you have to allow for cultivation. Am I correct?
The IM-26 prohibits the local jurisdiction from prohibiting a dispensary. So
Okay.
there's a lot of blending in all of our minds between what Amendment A required and allowed versus what IM-26
Okay.
provided for. So
So the way that we have it in front of us, unless Commissioner Barth has support to allow for the cultivation or testing, I
You're
don't-
against commerce, you're against business?
I'm not against business, and you know that, Commissioner Barth. We are starting small. These are the recommendations from the task force, and that's what I'm standing by.
The task force to which I was not appointed, not invited, and never even given the schedule of when the meetings were, all behind closed doors as far as I'm concerned.
And that's why we're discussing it here. And everybody gets an opportunity to hear our thoughts.
I would just say that all the meetings were held at the public library. Can't be any more public than that.
You can't retroactively invite me. After the meetings are over, I can't go.
This first reading, we will have second reading, and we will be taking public input right after we're done having this discussion. Did we cover all the blanks?
we did, Mr. Chair. The only thing that I may suggest, given your current mechanism, is without a need for a decision this morning, perhaps any thoughts that you may have you want to share with Carol, and then she and I can discuss those as far as my drafting of the resolution is concerned. I'll bring you what I think matches as much as I understand at that point, and then you're certainly free to change that on the fly. And if you'd prefer me to bring one with blanks, I'll just bring it with blanks. So.
Well, I think our numbers are pretty well nailed down. I would look for input from the auditor on what the application fee should be. So if you want to put some thought into how much we should be charging for an application, what it's going to take to do all the various mechanisms of getting that done. I support Commissioner Heiberger's and Benniga's, and I think Barth's $100,000 biannual fee, I think is what it is. It's every other year for licensing. So I think we can move forward with this. So now we're at the point where we're going to ask for proponents of this proposed draft ordinance to speak. So anybody in favor of this ordinance may now speak to the commission. We will now look for opponents of this ordinance that may like to speak about this draft ordinance. Welcome. Please give us your name.
My name is Sarah Coop. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I actually quit using marijuana. I was very fortunate to have an experience that healed me. But I'm watching you guys, and I'm sitting here going, okay, do you guys want black market pot everywhere in Sioux Falls, South Dakota? That's the question. It grows anywhere. I can grow it in Alaska. I can grow it in Hawaii. I can grow it here in the Midwest. And I don't need a place to do it. I don't need any kind of chemicals. I can arrange that all from the food I eat and the water I collect from the sky. Okay? So I guess you guys really need to ask yourselves the question if you want violence, the kind of violence that comes with black market pot. Because one dispensary, I promise you that's exactly what you're going to get. You'll be California, to where nobody goes to the dispensaries, because I can go right down the street and find somebody on the street who has a huge operation going on in a warehouse and buy it from there. And there are many things that are in black market pot that is not in the dispensary pot. And part of them is heavy metals like cadmium and arsenic and some other things. And so I am asking you guys, please, don't limit it to one dispensary. Try to make this so that we're dealing with people who have serious medical conditions and need this to relieve their suffering. And I think that should be our focus, that should be our goal, is to make sure the weakest in South Dakota are able to manage their suffering, okay? And I just think that you guys are looking at black market pot to the extent that you can't even imagine in your head. And I'm hearing what you guys are going to put down for law enforcement and what the consequences are with law enforcement. And I'm like, everyone and their mother is going to do this. So please, Mr. Barth, I think he's right. I think you guys should at least have 20 dispensaries licenses out there and try to mitigate what you're going to get for black market, because you guys are going to get a huge amount if you guys keep up with this kind of ordinance. Okay? God bless you guys. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you, sir. Any other opponents to this ordinance? Please.
Bill Hoskins, Alderman, First Ward, the City of Garrettson. Just some points of information. All municipalities are required to come up with an ordinance. The City of Garrettson's been working on it. We've been working on templates with the Municipal League has been working with us. We're, as with alcohol, limited in how much licensing fees are going to be. So, for instance, I think what the majority of the municipalities, I think it's around $5,000. And we're being advised that we can't set a limit at 100,000, for instance. And that's been discussed, but I think the city of Brandon's going on a basis of population, the fees based upon population. So in all likelihood, you're going to have a lot of dispensaries throughout the county in those municipalities. That just the thought you should be aware, and certainly when you're considering your ordinance, should look at what the other municipalities are passing as well.
Thank you. Any other opponents to this ordinance? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt Jorgensen. I'm the CEO of Cannabis ChemLab. We are the exclusive testing facility for Native Nations cannabis right now, and we are looking forward to expanding our operations and helping out again throughout the state. We are looking to set up other laboratories. Regulations such as yours are preventing that from happening. We are trying to get, again, to be that gatekeeper. A little history about myself. I spent almost 20 years with law enforcement. Jeff knows me fairly well. I worked as a forensic scientist, both on the bench and running different crime labs throughout my career. I believe in being a gatekeeper. I believe in testing this stuff, getting that certificate of analysis, and I believe that you should encourage that type of environment where testing is actually not just wanted, but should be mandated. If we're going to have this industry in our state, and folks, we are going to have this industry in our state, it should be tested. It should be regulated. Law enforcement is not going to be able to do all of the testing. They're overburdened with the forensic science that they have at the moment. So testing facilities such as mine are going to be your gatekeepers. So I respectfully ask that you consider that as you move forward with this draft. Thank you very much.
Do anybody have questions? I think this individual is probably worthy of a question or two. If anybody has questions.
I'm available. I can hand out cards and my information if you want to do that on the side. But yes, I'm definitely here for questions.
I think one thing comes to my mind, sir, is it's Matt. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
How many dispensaries can a testing lab service?
Well, the clarification on that is once it gets to the dispensary, it's already should have a certificate of analysis.
Correct.
What we're servicing are the grows and the different extraction labs. As far as volume goes, I think that we can easily handle this side of the state with 1 or 2 laboratories.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Barth?
Matt, thanks for being here. Tell me, is there a standard that South Dakota has put forward as to what's in a edible, a gummy, and is there a standard for what's in the smokable? And Are we expecting one? Is,
The Department of Health, their rules have come up with minimum or maximum amounts of certain things such as heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, myotoxins, which are the molds and fungus, different things of that nature. Yes, they have come up with levels that they cannot go above for those particular toxins, if you will. They also set regulation for potency. Things such as when we test for the different cannabinoids, the different terpenes, those things, the potency of those things are going to be watched as well. That's all part of that certificate of analysis that we would be able to produce.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Other opponents to this ordinance? Again, this is a first reading, and are we scheduling a date for second for the 21st? Is that the idea, or the 28th?
28th, I think it is. We just did it.
Your next,
Next week?
if you wish, or if you're not ready to.
We don't have a meeting next week, so the next meeting would be the 21st.
That's fine.
I won't be here.
You won't be here? So the 28th?
I thought didn't we just schedule it?
Yeah, I thought
The
it was the
reading is the
28th.
No, that's for the zoning changes.
Oh, that was the zoning changes, okay. 28th?
So we need to pick a date of second reading. We have no meeting next week, so it's either the 21st or the 28th. Look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for the 21st. Gerald, did you say you're not going to be there?
No, I'm
sorry.
not here on the 21st.
Okay, the reason I suggested the 21st, if I might.
Was because I wasn't going to be here.
Well, you and Cindy can't be here, right? Just kidding. But the reason is because if the 28th is just before the deadline, it has to be put in place. And if we wait until the last second, then we get the bum rush to, well, you've got to vote for it today. And I don't like that. But I'm happy to do the 28th. I revise my motion and make a motion to the 28th. And can I talk any longer?
We have a motion.
And a second, and with a comment, just because I believe Commissioner Bender's going to be back then, and I think that there should be a 5-person vote. I feel bad that she's missed a lot of the conversation today, and I think that having an opportunity to weigh in is important.
I'm going to ask legal counsel, any issues with publishing or enactment if we set it for the 28th?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you. That's a perfect question. If you all remember, our temporary ordinance that we passed says that we will enact an ordinance within 60 days after the Department of Health finalizes their rules. So we built in a window of action that we are more than safe. Be honest, I had my own panics about whether or not we were too late taking action in September, but I reminded myself and want to remind all of you that we do have that 60-day window after the Department of Health finalizes their own rules, which they have not done yet. So if they enact those as they're currently expected to do the first part of October, we still have 60 days after that. So if for some reason we do need a third reading, if you find additional changes that you want made, we still have that window. So the 28th is just fine.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to set the second reading for September 28th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. See you on the 28th. All right, briefing on an analysis of the Minnehaha County Treasurer's Office. Chris and I think Dr. Tracy.
Good morning, Commissioners. So the Minnehaha County Treasurer's Office had the privilege of having Dr. Dan Tracy, USD professor in Beacon School of Business, analyze the space within our office. And so he is here today to give us his what do you want to say? Recommendations. There you go. So I'll let you go ahead. I'll just sit back here.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Dan Tracy. I am here in my capacity as an independent consultant for Minnehaha County Treasurer's Office. I have both a theoretical and a practical background to do this kind of research with a PhD in operations management, operations research, and some previous consulting related to operations management and other things. The framework for recommendations that I use is to first use my professional perspective. One is I'm independent. I have no ties to Minnehaha County government, so I can say what I think is right, and then it's up to you to decide if you agree. It's unbiased. I didn't have an agenda other than to do process improvements. The treasurer, Treasurer Swanson, and I have talked at length about much of these issues. And like I said, I bring a professional air to it just simply because I have the academic knowledge and the practical experience to put together something that's very workable, as I have done in the past for the commission. I also tend to be very conservative in my recommendations. I want to make sure that we have a systemic, effective use of the limited county resources. I know that there's not a lot of money out there, that you guys have to work with a pie that doesn't get a lot bigger and requests that do get a lot bigger. So it makes a judicious and conservative approach to additional expenditures necessary. Okay? So basically, I've been working over the past month or so with the Treasurer's Office to address overall capacity and other needs. To analyze the current and future space utilization of the Treasurer's Office, and to identify some recommendations for process layout. Okay? Initially, when I came down here, and I spent 8 days with the Treasurer's Office here personally, courtesy of Lions Campground. I actually stayed in Sioux Falls and enjoyed the campground. But the current staff down there is very customer-centric, very focused on serving customers, both on the phone and in the hallway that stand in line. They're currently adequately trained, but without a lot of formal training system in place. And so standard practices are orally transmitted rather than by written policy. The current layout seems to be comfortable, but it hasn't changed much in recent years, and there are some opportunities for improvement. Collection of data and analysis of that data for process improvement right now is minimal, in part due to the fact that Treasurer Swanson is fairly new, and there have been some openings that she's had to fill, so they've been kind of operating a little bit in emergency mode, understandably. And from my observations, there are lots of opportunities for simple operational improvements, so much of which I will go through. Okay? So the basis for my analysis and recommendations is simply that in service operations such as the Treasurer's Office, the diagnostic tool for that is twofold. To one, look at cost, because it's important to never to overlook costs, as we can't just spend money indiscriminately. And then waiting lines, and particularly in service businesses, that is a real key diagnostic for the efficiency and effectiveness of the underlying processes. So if there are issues with cost or waiting lines, they usually stem from the underlying processes, but what we see is the waiting lines and the calls on hold on the telephone. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to discuss some of the process improvements and then be able to demonstrate with both cost and waiting line improvements how those improvements will manifest themselves in terms of the measurements we have of those service-related processes. Okay. So I spent a bunch of time collecting data. Some of you had seen me down in the hallway down there with my time study watch. I observed on a busy day, which I'm told is Mondays, Fridays, and the last day of the month. So I spent a long Monday identifying how fast customers arrive at the Treasurer's Office to the tune of about 500 customers that Monday. And then on a slower day, the next day, 370 customers. I'm assuming that those were fairly average because it wasn't anything remarkable about the calendar. So I'm sure there were Mondays, Fridays, and last days of the month that were significantly more busy than that, and others that are less busy. Okay? I also spent a few days looking at customer service times, so then I went for the opposite side with my time study watch and measured how long it took the techs at the windows to actually complete services. And so I did that for 3 days, which is a little bit more time consuming, but I have a very nice sample of 358 service times encompassing all the different services that they provide. I also did interviews with 19 staff, toured the facility from the treasurer's perspective, from information technology, and for the facility's perspective. And I provided some cost estimates that I've received from the treasurer, from IT, and from human resources and facilities. Some of the facilities numbers will be forthcoming, and you'll see that later in the presentation. I also got some service data for past service data from the treasurer's office records with a variety of different technology systems that record how transactions are completed, and with telephone data as well. Okay. The methodologies that I used in my analysis were basically to use waiting line modeling, and I'm not going to get into the details of what all that is. This is fairly technical. But basically, I utilized all of that arrival and service data that I collected to plug into a model to identify, theoretically, how the waiting lines would behave. How many people would end up in line? What's the probability that there would be so many people in line that people would just not enter the line? What's how long people had to wait in line? Those sorts of things. And then I also used a forecast of monthly transactions based on the service data that I collected to identify how that's going to change out into the future. And I have data that would be for representing this year and the next 4 years, so 5 years worth of predictions. Okay? I also did some time studies based on the customer service data to identify some standard times to predictably identify how long services take so that we could use that for capacity planning. Okay? I also identified in terms of analyzing the processes how far people traveled to do certain things. And as you'll see in the data, some of the things they're traveling to do, and by traveling I mean walking, identified that the critical ones were traveling to the printers, the decal printers, and the other paper printers, and to the copier to estimate the time savings that I could identify based on different layout plans than currently exist. Okay? I also looked at some of the office layout changes with print and copy technology and location changes. I also did some capacity analysis, just simply based on the current capacity, and then on future capacity with the potential for some new hires and some layout changes, and I'll identify those as I go along as well. So currently, here's what I see as the problems, and I've discussed all of these with the treasurer already. The lines and the wait time are too long on busy days and periodically on slower days. That needs to improve. Having sat out in the hallway, I know what customers say when they're not in front of techs. Some of it is very polite, some of it is not pleasant, but it is frequent. They're sharing when I'm sitting out there and I tell them I don't work for the county. The compensation attempted, or the commission, I'm sorry, the treasurer's office does try to compensate for those long lines by using back-of-the-house staff. Now, understand.
That's what BOH stands for. I was trying to
That's
figure out what
back of the
BOH,
house.
okay.
It's operational, sorry. Understandably, when these back-of-the-house staff are routinely used for serving customers at the windows, that takes away from the tasks that they're actually supposed to be doing. So it causes backlogging of things like tax deeds and dealerships and liens and mail processing, those sorts of things. Okay? The back of the house also is also included in the telephone queue. So when they go to the windows to help, they are not by their telephone. And so the queue remains empty, or the availability remains less. And so we end up with a significantly increased number of dropped and unserved calls. So we're informally, we're pissing off customers on the phone because they sit there and wait and wait and wait, and nobody answers. Far too many customers arrive and wait without sufficient documentation, which means the lines are longer, they wait longer, and then they get to the front of the line and realize they don't have the documentation. I couldn't identify specifically exactly how long that, how often that happens, but self-reported from the people who work the techs, conservative estimates that it happens at least 1 in 5 customers. So they come up to the window, they get there, they don't have the right stuff, they have to leave and come back. Sometimes it's their car, sometimes it's their home, sometimes it's returning on a different day. So we're recycling customers, and they're waiting again and again and again. Okay? There's also lots of repetitive walking for printing and copying, which will be addressed. There are some space allocation and storage needs, and we can improve those dramatically. The handicapped accessible window right now is window 12, which is at the south end of the line. It's actually quite a poor location. You have to go through that skinny lane in front of the auditor's office all the way to the end for somebody in a wheelchair or a walker or a cane. And so that needs to be changed. For the current traffic flow, it's just not a workable location for that. There's also a complete personnel inflexibility because everybody that works in the treasurer's office, with the exception of one, is full-time. So that means if somebody gets sick, somebody decides to retire, take a vacation, or even take a lunch break, there is very limited capacity to cover for that, which means windows simply close for at least some period of time. From the customer's perspective, that's you standing out in the hallway and the green light turns red and it looks like they just sent somebody off on break despite the fact that the line was really long. It looks like we're not serving them. Okay? So here was the current baseline from the data. And if you'll notice on the left there, the current system, and this is when I collected the data, the treasurer's office was 3 full-time tax and licensing techs short. And so the numbers look really bad. The probability of blocking is that's the probability that someone would leave because the line is too long. They would just not enter the line. The average waiting time in line and the average number in line are unacceptable. Now, these aren't real. This is theoretically what would happen. Treasurer Swanson's response to this was to take the back of the house people, put them in those empty slots, and try to get more and more people served. Okay? But this is a real problem because then the back of the house things don't get done, the tax deeds pile up, the liens pile up, and other work that really needs to get done gets put on a back burner. Okay? That was on Monday. Tuesday, on a slow day, it still happens. Okay? So this is not something, this is something that was happening on a regular basis. Now, since that's happened, 3 new hires have been made. And so you can see that the performance of the lines actually, even from a theoretical perspective, has dramatically improved with only issues early in the day, okay? At least significant issues. But I also did some forecasting and extended out using a conservative 2.2% growth, which was based on trend projections from the data that I received. By 2026, those problems are going to become more prevalent, okay? And that's with our current system, even with all the windows having a full-time person hired, okay? We're still going to have to be bringing people forward from the back of the house to cover for a variety of things, okay? Here's the waiting line stats. I think I had that. That's the same one, isn't it? Yes. Sorry. Duplicated. Here's the telephone call data that I collected. And I'll have you notice on the lower left there, from January to July, the performance has actually improved fairly dramatically. So as Treasurer Swanson has worked, the phones have been getting better. But these are still a large number of calls. And and those numbers are not for the month. Those are an average daily number of abandoned calls. Okay? Day of the week doesn't seem to matter much, although it seems to drift a little bit heavier on abandoned calls early in the week. And as you can see in the time to serve the abandoned calls column, that's how much time, based on how long it takes to complete services, based on the call data, that's how long it would take to address the calls that are being abandoned. Okay? And just as a frame of reference, the percentage of abandoned calls is still, roughly 1 in 10, 1 in 9. Yes.
That's not per abandoned call, that would be a cumulative of all abandoned calls.
That's, if you take 25 calls for 199 calls on an average Monday, that's 13% get abandoned.
But the time to serve abandoned calls, maybe I'm not clear.
Well,
on that.
it's not shown in here, but the amount of time that it actually takes to process a phone call and process those 25 calls would be 64 minutes. So
Total.
it takes 64 minutes worth of a person.
Okay.
So if that back of the house person who's supposed to be on the phone normally is up working a window, then that 64 minutes causes an abandonment of calls that is unrecoverable.
We don't know how many times one individual abandoned a call, so that could
It's
impact.
impossible for us to identify whether that person is called back over and over
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
I can just
okay.
tell you from managing the calls, 13% on an average Monday don't get answered.
Okay.
Sure.
Those abandoned calls you're talking about, we do have, like, they'll be the same person that'll call in numerous times throughout the day. Because they'll say, oh, this person called in again and again. And we've had them call 7 to 10 times a day, that one person, so.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just impossible from the data to.
I understand.
To
Okay.
identify that. I can also show you, and this is where it gets into the personnel from the back of the house. Right now, the current phone chain is 5 back of the house staff in order. When there are 5 phone lines, the average abandoned calls are 16. If somebody has to go step up to a window, that number goes up to 22 because there's only 4 lines available. So it's really simple and obvious to see that if there's less people answering the phones, we'll have more abandoned calls. So the key is to keep the people who are supposed to be answering phones and not serving at the windows. Okay? So based on all of that, here are the process changes that I recommend. And they are numerous, and Treasurer Swanson and I have talked about all of these, and I've addressed either parenthetically here or in some later slides what the cost estimations would be for all of these improvements. Complete the 3 new hires and training as soon as possible. That's in process and in fact almost complete, and that was already in the budget. Convert the next new hire, which would be a senior tech that is about to retire after long service to the Treasurer's office, to 3 part-time positions to increase flexibility for scheduling and breaks. Because this is a senior tech position, the net cost increase for the 3 part-times is actually 0 because they don't use as many benefits. So you're basically taking a 40-hour-a-week person and getting 60 hours worth of labor out of it. Okay? You can use those 3 part-time people to compensate for the breaks. The back of the house techs then are only used for lunch break supplementation, and I can show you a schedule of that a little bit later. But basically, it keeps the back of the house people in the back of the house doing what they're supposed to be doing and keeps more people on the windows than are currently proposed. I also propose to convert to a new operating hours. Right now, it's 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We've talked about this at length, about converting to opening the treasurer's office at 7:30 in the morning. As you might see from the data, for example, the Monday that I collected data, at 8 o'clock, 28 people came in immediately because they were waiting outside the door as soon as the doors opened. That means all windows are open and there's 16 people in line before anybody enters during normal business hours. We need to alleviate that. That's part of the reason from the issue. Okay? The other one is at the end of the day, 5:30 instead of 5 o'clock. I'm told by Carol that the opening the doors and closing the doors at that time is really not an issue since we're within a half an hour of our normal business hours. Right? New shifts for the full-time techs, using their current preferences that I gained from the interviews to create new schedules. They'll all be 8 hours for the full-time techs, but they might start at 7:30. They might take a half-hour lunch. They might take an hour lunch. They might start as late as 9 and work an 8-hour day with a half-hour lunch. But that allows the treasurer the flexibility to schedule across when needed most. Okay? And again, there's no additional cost because you still have people working 40 hours. It's just a different 40 hours. Okay? We increased the back of the house queue to 7 phones. Okay? That means the last 3 in the queue will basically answer 5 calls per day or less from their workstation. I think there's some adjustment from IT, but it will be a fairly negligible cost to change to a 7-phone queue. But the reality is that should virtually eliminate abandoned calls. Okay. Relocate the decal printers within the pairs of pods down in the treasurer's office and for pairs of back of the house offices. Let me explain how this kind of works right now. So let's say I'm in a pod and I'm helping a customer and I print a decal for a license renewal or a receipt. Then I have to walk around the partition, grab the decal, grab the thing off the printer, and then go back in there. That motion is waste. That adds 0 value. And you'll see how much time is spent doing that through my analysis in a few slides. But the reality is if I can relocate those decal printers within the pods, they just simply turn around and grab. There's no steps. I also would like to replace the printers that they have with printer scanner copiers. Cost analysis has already been done, and I'll have that in another slide, but that prevents them from doing 2 things. One, walking around the partition to get their printer, and walking to the single large copier that is in one of the back rooms. It's a significant walk, done 8 to 12 times each day by each window tech. Okay? What that basically does is on the average reduces the service times from about 10.25 minutes to a flat 10 minutes. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but think about that. 10.25 minutes to 10 minutes is about 1/4 minute for each and every one of those 500 customers each day. Over the course of the year, as you'll see, it adds up to about 900 hours of wasted time savings. Okay? I'm also suggesting that we add a 13th window, south of window 12. Right now, that is an office space, but could be fairly easily converted to an additional window. Okay? And I would also suggest moving the dedicated handicapped window to window 1. So when the handicapped people come in, normally in the middle of the building, even though there's handicapped parking at the other end, they still normally come in through the middle of the building. The first door or the first window they have there should be the ADA compliant one. Okay? And there's a cost to that which still needs to be addressed. Okay? I'd like to relocate the back of the house staff doing a kind of musical offices shuffle, kind of like my previous recommendation to the commission about what we did with departments on campus, to help facilitate security for cash procedures, to facilitate the new window, for a quieter space for the main phone lines, those sorts of things. Okay? I'd also recommend some additional signage in the hallway for markers on the ceiling. It's a minimal cost, I'm told by Carol, that's something that what we already do. It would simply be down the main line, waiting line, at a certain point at about 10 customers deep. You would say, the sign along the ceiling would say, approximately 5 minutes to the window. Then further back, approximately 10 minutes to the window. It gives a definite perception for the customers in the hallway how long they have to wait. Without that, they assume how long they have waited. And a consumer behavior study tells us that it's usually 3 to 4 times as much as they actually wait. That's what their perception of waiting is. So if they've waited out there 20 minutes, they're going to think it's the better part of an hour. Okay? That'll help alleviate that, and that's a simple change. Also, to change the signage on the lobby box that says where you can deposit your property tax payments, something called a report of sale notice, which does not require the techs to do anything but receive it, and then they process it when they're less busy. Just have them be able to put that in the box instead of clogging up the line. Okay? And that's simply just a change of a sign. I'd also like to have the Treasurer's Office convert window number 2 to be kind of an express line for vehicle tag renewal and property tax payments only. That will get that line churning. So if you've got a single property tax payment or a single vehicle renewal, you can hop into this line. That line is going to move fast because those transactions don't take very long, and that will give the perception that we'll have much shorter lines. Okay? Even when the lines appear to be longer, it still looks like they're really moving fast. Okay? I also want to mandate the use of the flip voice, which is just simply when a customer, when a tech is done, they hit a button and it says, window 9 is available for the next customer. Okay? This is not, it just simply is a psychology of waiting issue. You know, they're going to be watching. They'll know what's open. But the people way in the back of the line are going to hear that customers are being served. It just simply gives them an idea that things are moving forward in a reasonably expeditious manner. Okay? We need to have additional chairs for the handicapped accessible window. Right now, there's only one outside of the one that they're sitting there. We already have them, so it's not an additional cost. You just need to put some more chairs out there for those that are handicapped, so they don't have to stand there. I also suggested when we do get busy, and we still will get to the point where we have some times where the lines are long, you know, particularly the last day of the month. I've suggested to the treasurer and to the facilities person to establish a triage cart, like a movable desk, to move out into the hallway, and so you can use that to identify, you know, do you go to this line or that line? Do you have the proper documentation? That sort of stuff to make the effective and efficient use of the window techs optimal on the days when they need it the most. Okay? I also noticed that some of the techs in back did not have a second monitor for their workstations, which helps productivity greatly. When I mentioned that, there were 3 back-of-the-house staff that didn't have them. Within 2 hours, IT had already provided existing inventory to accomplish that, so that one's already done. I needed an additional piece of equipment, a 2-door filing cabinet for the current tax freeze records. That comes out of existing inventory. I also suggested a policy change after 5 o'clock. Right now, informal policy is that we don't do titles after 5 o'clock. And we've noticed some real issues with that. People leaving very upset because they're standing in line at 5 to 5, and they're still in line at 5 after 5. They get up to the front and say, sorry, we don't do titles. That is not what the treasurer wants. That's not what the customer wants. But we can change that. And what we'll do is just simply have a policy where if you have a single title, not a dealer that's got 15 of them to do, or a single vehicle tag renewal, if you're already in line at 5 o'clock, we will stay until you're served, which is one of the reasons for the 5:30 office closing time. Okay? That also, because of the different shifts, we've got volunteers to already stay till 5:30 by their normal 8-hour shift, so it virtually eliminates all front of the house, the windows, all that overtime. There needs to be a simple documentation sign, and you notice there's a COVID sign out in the lobby. What we'd like to do is we'd like to use those COVID sign frames to identify what documentation is needed for a particular service. And so they'll be sitting up nice and high, and so you can see if you're coming in for an auto renewal, you need this, 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 and this. If you're coming in for an auto renewal and you're from out of state, additionally, you need this and this. So it's very, very clear. We have a website, people don't use it. And we'll address some other issues with the website. But it's just another method to keep people from staying in line and getting up to the window and then finding out they don't have everything they need. Okay? Treasurer Swanson has a yellow documentation sheet. In other words, if they do get up to the window and you don't have the right stuff, there's a little sheet, it's kind of check box. You need this, this, and this. If there's more than one item they need, to use that and to mandate that being sent home with a customer so they know exactly, written out, this is what you need before you come back. So it eliminates a third and a fourth and a fifth trip, which I did observe while I was down there. I also propose changing the cash count policy, which right now, if you get a payment of more than $500, you're required to go back to the assistant treasurer and have them count your money to verify it. Okay? And then once they do that, they put it in a record it that it came from this window and this amount. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to change that to at every break, or for payments of more than $2,000. Payments of more than $500 are fairly common, which means every time they get a cash transaction for that, they've got to take a break, go from the window, go to the assistant treasurers, and get it counted. Okay? This will just save a lot of those trips. The other thing I'd like to do is the back of the house closers, there's a different person each day that's responsible for closing the office down and shutting out the lights, make sure everything's locked. That back of the house closer needs to be the cash counter for the day. If that person is the cash counter for the day, all cash verifications go through one person. One person does all that work and is responsible for all that cash and to allocate it to the right windows. That gives you better internal controls for cash control security. Okay? You also need to negotiate with software vendor updates to have them done outside of business hours only. Right now, software vendors are updating during business hours, and all of a sudden your terminal is dead for 10 to 20 minutes. And there's nothing you can do with your customers except say, I'm sorry. It's totally unnecessary. Okay? There also needs to be some additional cross-training for dealerships. That says plates, it should say plats, sorry. Mobile homes, tax deeds, tax-frees, those sorts of things. A lot of that is already happening. It needs to happen more so that there's a backup to the backup. Okay. Here's what the schedule would look like. Rather than 8 to 5, Monday through Friday with an hour lunch, now you can see across the top the shift techs. That's the 12 techs that operate the windows. They each have a variety of different shifts, and there are 3 new ones in there. I just kind of plugged in where they would best fit, and that's what Treasurer Swanson would do. but the remainder of the 9 that are in there are according to preferences expressed by the current employees, okay? And then the 1 senior tech would be converted to a series of part-time employees that would work 7:30 to 11 to help with early issues with volume, 2 to 5:30 to help with late issues for volume, and then 10 to 2 to help with lunch coverage, okay? For now, that will work. I know that, that Treasurer Swanson has requested in the budget for another position for next year. I believe she really needs it. And what I would suggest she would do was to hire another series of part-time people. And what that would do is it would allow us to open another window on the busiest days of the month, the Mondays, the Fridays, the last day of the month, to better serve our customers and get them through the process without having to come back or just not show up, okay, which, like I said, happens. Here's what would happen. Now it's broken down instead of by hour, by half hour, because of the variety of different, so using this schedule, and this is without that new person that's budgeted for next year. That's the total number of techs that you would have, less breaks. So for example, at 9 o'clock, that 1 person represents your short 1 person for that half an hour because 2 people are taking a 15-minute break, okay? And then the next column is for lunches for their particular shift, whether it's a half-hour lunch or a full-hour lunch. That's what would be needed for the current set of schedules. And then a lot of those are covered by the back-of-the-house techs. So right now, there are 5 of them qualified to do lunch break coverage. But the effect is the net number of techs you now notice, instead of when a break, we just have less windows open. From 9 o'clock in the morning till virtually 4 o'clock in the afternoon, all windows are open. And the lines will virtually disappear, at least at current volume. In the future, there are going to be some lines, but they will be manageable, okay? So here's what I based this on. I looked at the data. There's the 2.2% trend. That's an average. It's probably higher than that, but there was a little bit of a downtick during 2020 because of COVID, okay? And so here's what it would look like in the future. Here's the probability of somebody just leaving before they even enter the line. That's the probability of blocking. You see, today it only happens at 7:30 and 4 o'clock. 2 additional part-time people, we can mitigate those. But as you go out in the future, by the time you get to 2026, it's happening more often and to a greater extent, okay? The amount of people in line. Now, this is going to be real, just simply because all windows are open now, except for early on in the day and late in the day, which is where you're going to see most of the issues. That's what the additional part-time person early and part-time person late are for, okay? And the waiting time, again, becomes unreasonable some of those times. It's not too bad in 2021, but in 2026 it will become more problematic as we go along. What you can do is you can look at this ongoing and identify, like I said, right now I think we need the additional part-time help that Treasurer Swanson has asked for this next year in that new part-time person for the 13th window. I think it's then incumbent upon her to establish, do I need an extra part-time person and in what part of the day as we go along to continue to address customer service needs. Now, mind you that all of this will be without losing dropped calls because the back of the house people are dominantly in the back of the house doing the jobs. so we don't have the backlogs of dealerships, dealership work, plats, tax deeds, liens, those sorts of things. Okay? Here's the copier cost issue. Based on that quarter of an hour difference, that saves 885.4 hours a year. That's really conservative. It's probably higher than that. But I always try to overpromise and underpromise and overdeliver. So this is the minimum cost that you're going to see out of that. Using the average basic starting tech wage, that's wage savings of about $15,000 a year, just from that simple move of printers and copiers. We also have a copier that's older down there that you could sell. I figured at 40% of its value. You could recover, roughly $1,800 or $1,900 for the copier. You'd also eliminate the copy fees per year, which is like 0.009 cents a page, and the monthly copier maintenance fee. So the total annual savings is about $18,000. The costs of the new printers that are printer, scanner, copier to be placed within the pods and within pairs of workstations would be approximately $14,400, and that's including the first year purchase price and 4 sets of toners for every printer. So it's a complete cost. In subsequent years, it would be the same basic printing cost for the toners that the current printers would use. Okay. And then there are some costs to actually move the decal printers that I got from IT. Some of those would have to be moved by a state contractor because apparently that's state stuff, so it costs a little bit more. It's about $400 a printer. So the total new cost for that would be about $21,200. So for a net cost of $3,400, we can fundamentally change how the techs actually operate at the windows and make them more capable of serving the customers. There are some other costs. Renovation of window 1 to ADA compliant. I did not have information on that yet. I hopefully will for the final report. Chris and I talked this morning, and she estimated the time they did it last time was about $3,000 to convert that to an ADA compliant window. The new window we could put in the next year's budget. I'm assuming the new window, because it's going through an existing wall that is similar to everything else, wouldn't be more than $5,000. And then to do the musical offices and take movable equipment and move current stuff that needs to be eliminated from the treasurer's office into storage over in the old jail, I just put in an estimate of about $10,000. So for all of the recommendations, other than a lot of blood, sweat, and tears implementing that, will fall to Carol and her assistant and Treasurer Swanson. We can accomplish that all for about $20,000. In the long run, it will save the customers and the reputation of the treasurer's office a lot of heartache. And so there are some other things that were beyond the scope of what I could do that I would also recommend. The website really is not customer-centric right now. It needs to be more customer-centric. So a customer who's going out there to look for information about the treasurer's office and how it can serve them needs to be more like that. My suggestion is, a fairly inexpensive suggestion, is to hire a marketing and digital media intern to accomplish that and work with your IT people to do that. The message, and I'm not sure that may have already been done on the telephone, that identifies how you can be served by the treasurer's office when you call, needs to be more customer-centric. I called the first time, and I actually sat through the whole thing, and it was, I was thoroughly confused by the time I finished. Thank goodness one of the options was press operator. I have a feeling that's done more often than not. I also suggest hiring an operational analytics intern to write policy manual and standard operating procedures for the SD CARS system, in code, and for additional training. And between HR and Treasurer Swanson to rewrite an actual written training schedule for new employees. Right now, it's done by word of mouth. Okay? I also think we need to, when possible, integrate the bank's POS system into the main PC. Right now, what happens is you do all your work on your main PC, and then when it comes time to make a payment, you go over to the bank system with a touchscreen POS system, and then you go back and you put stuff back into the main PC. It's really redundant. It is expensive to do that, and so when the new software updates and hardware updates come about, my suggestion is that you work with the bank to integrate the two with touch screens. It will be much more effective for the staff, and it will save a ton of time. I also think that we ought to hire an operational analytics intern to establish 5S office organization protocols to redesign office and pod layouts to identify a more consistent way to have all the pods done. They're all fairly similar now, but not the same. So if one person went to work from this pod to that pod, it might be more difficult. If they were all standard, which would be needed if you're going to have part-time people working and plugging in, that would be something that would be important. And to establish some vacation scheduling procedures. That right now for Treasurer Swanson is a nightmare. With only full-time people, when somebody gets sick, takes a vacation, it's a hole that without that flexibility of part-time people can't be filled. It just is an empty hole that until they recover from an illness or come back from vacation. Okay? There are going to be more details to come with the written report, which you should have all the commissioners and Carol and her assistant and Chris and her assistant Cindy downstairs. All of you should have that written report within a week. If there are additional questions that I can address right now, I would be more than happy to. And thanks for your time.
I believe we got what we paid for. Anything right now, comments, questions from commissioners? Commissioner Heiberger.
This was a wealth of information. I think we talked about 45 minutes, which is a lot of stuff to absorb. And I'm thankful that there is a written report coming.
That'd be a light 20 to 30 page reading coming for you.
So just backing up just a little bit, I think that I think one of your recommendations was the person that's going to be retiring soon, a senior tech or senior something, that you're suggesting putting those as 3 part-time positions now, and then the possibility of the one that she had asked for in her budget, which we haven't finalized our budget, would also
Would be converted to part-time.
would be converted to 3 part-time people instead of 1 full-time position.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
thank you.
I would just say I'm thrilled with your flexibility, both in the treasurer's office and your opportunity to reevaluate what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I appreciate the written plan to move ahead.
Well, I also probably should apologize to Carol's new assistant because he's actually going to have to implement all this stuff. But you're free to call.
Well, my thought is that, it's easy to just say you need to hire more people. And this was a whole lot more than you just need to hire more people. This was very detailed and analytical, and this is what you should do and how you should implement it, the use of part-time people, technology. If a taxpayer is to have any interaction with the county, it's going to be most likely through the treasurer's office. I mean, that's the one place that they're going to see the county in action. I had a call just the week before last. Somebody was there over their lunch hour on I can't remember what day of the week, but they were there for almost an hour and they weren't happy. So,
Man, like I said, those over the lunch hour, because we don't have the flexibility with only full-time people,
Yeah, it's hard.
it's not on purpose, but it is unavoidable.
well, but we do have a plan.
That's what you paid me to come up with.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very much. All righty. Look for a motion to certify the results of the August 17th, 2021 election for the Evergreen Acres Road District. Auditor Kite.
Good morning, Commissioners. Don't have anything as exciting for you as medical marijuana nor reconfiguring offices, but we do have a few items to take care of on road districts. So on August 17th, the property owners at Evergreen Acres voted to form the road district. Of the 57 property owners, 29 voted for those, and they voted 25 in favor and 4 against forming the road district. And after that election, we also held an election for trustees for 3 members, of which they elected 3. I did provide you copies of the tally sheets for each of the elections for the formation of the road district and the election of the trustees. I would have the originals available to you if you would like to see those, but otherwise I have copies. But I would look for your support in approving the election results.
Look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Barr, second by Benega. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I think that required a roll call.
Oh, wait, roll call. Call the roll.
Hiberger,
Aye.
Barr,
Aye.
Benega,
Aye.
Karski.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on, consider motion to issue order of incorporation for Evergreen Acres Road District. Same,
Yes.
same subject.
Yeah, same subject, just connection with the formation of the road district. We also need to issue a order of incorporation that would be filed with the Secretary of State's office. Yeah, it just basically is what it says. So, any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Call the roll.
Barr. Benega. Hiberger,
Aye.
Karski.
Motion carries. Resolution to establish boundaries of Meadowview Circle Road District.
Yeah, so continuing our road district theme, we have another request from homeowners in the Meadowview Circle area. This is located northwest of Crooks. There's about 8, there are 8 property owners in this development that would like to form a road district. They presented the petition to me, which I have verified the petitions that they're all in order. I think I provided a aerial view of the requested development. If you approve that, we will move forward and have an election from those property owners to confirm their desire to form the road district.
Motion to approve.
Second.
My quick question.
Yes.
You're just looking at that map, and I don't know, can you, the road is included in that district, right?
Well, it would be the road that goes into the development, yes, as you see there.
Yeah.
But Chair, it's a county road, east and west, north of that.
The road, the Meadowview Circle, that's included in there. The way the map is drawn, it looks like it isn't included in there.
Oh, yeah, no, it is included in there.
Okay.
It is that one road that goes through the middle of that property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Call the roll.
Benega. Hiberger,
Aye.
Barr. Karski.
Aye. Motion carries. And thank you, Ben. Motion to approve and authorize chair to sign a right-of-way purchase agreement for project number 1604 Highway 137 reconstruction. Mr. Groen. Welcome, Steve.
Good morning, Commissioners. Steve Groen, Highway Superintendent. This is related to the road reconstruction project from a few years ago on County Road 137. The road was realigned across from Willow Creek Lutheran, and we are in the process of cleaning up our right-of-way in the general area.
Motion to approve the right-of-way.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Steve. Consider a motion to declare a copier at the Defense Attorney Council Room as surplus and authorized disposable by waste recycling center. This is Public Defender's Office. They have a copier that's old and they don't need it, and they just want approval to dispose of it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Call the roll.
Benega.
Aye.
Hiberger,
Aye.
Barr.
Aye.
Karski.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to declare museum department vehicle as surplus and authorize disposable by auction. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Bill Hoskins, Director of the Siouxland Heritage Museums. This is a Ford 2001 Ford Econoland van that we got from the sheriff on surplus after they'd used it up and used it for a few years, and we'd like to dispose of it through auction.
Catalytic converter on it?
It has none.
Motion to approve.
And, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's not a collector's item?
No.
Roll.
Hiberger,
Aye.
Barth,
Aye.
Bender, oh, sorry, Benega,
Aye.
Karski.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Bill is on my liaison report thing, so maybe he should report right now about, you know, what we've endowed ourselves with this past year and other results from our last board meeting, which was last week.
You put him on the
Comments, Bill?
spot.
Sure. We received our annual report for the museum's endowment from the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation, and the endowment grew from approximate, and I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but approximately 1.7 million in the endowment as of July 1st, 2020, and approximately 2.2 million as of June 30th, 2021. That money is in the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation. We can draw 4% of the average over the last 12 quarters as a disbursement. That amount was, I think, about $92,000. And the museum board met and is going to be requesting a disbursement of $76,000. That will come into our 2021 enterprise fund budget, and that's how it will funnel into our spending.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Consider a motion to approve and authorize the chair to sign a request to display fireworks at Houston Speedway on September 12th. Hi, Melinda.
Hi. This request is from Mike Denning with Fireworks Store. He is asking authorization to display fireworks at Houston Speedway on September 12th, 2021 at 9:45 p.m. for approximately 6 minutes. Minnehaha County does not have an ordinance in place governing the discharge of fireworks at public and private events within its boundaries, but South Dakota counties have the statutory authority to issue permits for the use of display fireworks and consumer fireworks at public and private events. The Minnehaha County Director of Emergency Management has reviewed the enclosed documents and has no concerns.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Second one.
The second one is, again, Mike Denning with Fireworks Store. This request is to display fireworks at Laurel Ridge Barn on September 11th, 2021 at 8:15 p.m. for approximately 3 minutes. Again, the Emergency Management Director has reviewed the documents and is not concerned.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Consider a motion to determine method of sale for county-owned property at 1900 West Russell Street, and in his inaugural appearance before the commission, Tyler Klatt. Welcome.
Nervous because I am too. Tyler Klatt, Commission Office. This item before you is the next step in the relationship with the county in 1900 West Russell Street. Before you, we need to select a method of sale. The options include a sealed bid, a public auction, or through a real estate broker. Some brief history. This property, on August 17th, the commission authorized it as surplus property and authorized the staff to obtain an appraisal. The appraisal board provided that report to the commission on August 24th at a value of $1 million. And now today, again, we look for your direction on how to move forward with a method of sale. Each option of method of sale requires a notice of publication twice, the earliest of which is to be no later than 10 days before the date of sale. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
So we need to determine which of the three we're going to use?
That's
Is that
correct.
Okay, so discussion from the commission.
I would recommend, I guess, the public auction. We've had really good success with that, and I think if you get 2 to 3 people in those arenas that are both interested in that property, it becomes a very beneficial conversation. The other 2 are okay, but I like the auction the best.
Commissioner?
I concur. I think that the auction, we had a great success. The last auction we did just recently, I'd like to see us set a minimum bid for an auction, so.
Do that.
Mr. Chairman, I agree, and let's set a minimum bid of $1 million. And is there gravel under this property?
The first 2 feet.
So,
I would make the motion, amend the motion to the minimum bid of $1 million.
so we have a motion to set the method of sale as a public auction with a minimum bid of $1 million. Okay, motion and a second?
Question of clarification. We're not removing the building, so that will be a part of the, we're not removing the building. Does that have to be a part of our publication or anything?
Property sold as is, you mean?
Right.
Mr. Chair, I would assume that it's a given it's sold as is unless you want to make it a particular qualification that the building be removed or some other condition. That would, yeah.
I know the $1 million number comes from the number signed by our appraisal board, I believe, is what they determined the value to be. I don't know if that's the right way to go. Is $1 million the right number?
It's a starting point.
It is, but I think it might be high, just personal opinion.
I was going to say it might be low. No.
Well, I'm hoping the final bid is higher, but, yeah, okay. So we have a motion and a second for $1 million, and do we set the date of sale also, or is this just
I think
for the
that's probably
determination?
something you need to work out with your auctioneer. So.
Okay, okay. So we will set a date of sale at a later date. All righty. I don't think I need a roll call vote, just a voice vote. So all those in favor of the motion and second,
Aye.
Aye.
opposed, same sign. All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I thought I saw the auditor flinch. Does he have an opinion on this? Because we have the other auction with the tax deeds, and just the slightest moment, and you get the
Yes,
win.
thank you.
Bid.
So, yeah, I would just remind the commission that our appraisal board was made up of non-commercial real estate professionals, right? And I think they probably used the broker's opinion that we received early in 2021, which was close to $1 million as well. But yeah, and I'm sure that we necessarily want to rely on the appraisal board view, but probably more on the broker's opinion that we received earlier in the year. And I don't think that broker opinion included the removal of the existing building or not. I'm not sure if there's that might be something you want to consider, right? If you remove the property, does that increase the value, or
Raising
is
the
it a wash?
structure is about $250,000 from my understanding.
Right, so, but that it might be part of your discussion, right? Is it worth to spend that money? Does it increase the value, or is it going to be a wash between the two?
Okay. Thank you, Ben. So at this point, subject to change in the future if we need to, we have a motion and a second. That's been carried. All right. Authorized chair to sign a lease agreement with Karstensen Contracting to utilize vacant county property for construction staging. Carol's not here, but we have the same property, I believe, is what we're discussing. And we have somebody who just wants to park some vehicles there, and they're willing to pay us a fee of I believe, $1,500 a month with a 30-day termination. So I hope I covered it well, if everybody did their homework.
Yep.
All right. Look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries 3-0. Consider a motion to adopt the first, third, and fourth Tuesdays of each month as regularly scheduled meetings for the Minnehaha County Board of Commissioners. I asked Carol to bring this, basically. The schedule we've been using up for the last 9 months.
Yes, and I apologize, I was following up on some of your other presentations that you'd had this morning. Yes, before you today is just a request for you to look at and give us a direction as to what you'd like to see happen for future meetings. Up until COVID, we met every week. From what I could tell, we're probably the only entity, state, or county that met every single week in the state of South Dakota. It has presented opportunity and challenges for us. And as an example, you have some really long meetings on occasion when this happens. But I know the one thing that I've heard most directly from department heads and elected officials is to make sure that we've got the schedule together so that we can move that forward. So if you've got any questions, I don't know if you heard from any department heads or elected officials, but would like to have direction for moving ahead on a permanent basis so that everybody knows exactly what schedules are going to be.
Comments?
I make a motion to continue with the first,
sec-
third, and fourth, and the fifth one is off.
I'll second that.
All righty. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All righty. Down to the favorite part, the money. Budget hearing for fiscal year 2022, County Auditor.
Yes, Ben Kite, Auditor's Office. Again, we're on the 27th of July, the Commission adopted or approved the provisional budget for 2022. Since then, we've had some additional information that's allowed us to update some of our numbers. So some adjustments to the general fund, building fund, and the highway fund. And you will adopt the final budget on end of September. But changes that we've received related to the general fund, we've had a very small increase due to the centrally assessed utilities. The SDI security contract, in that case, we picked up an additional $119,000 in revenue. The provisional budget did not, it included the expense for 3 positions at SDI. We did not include the reimbursement for that third position. So this recognizes that reimbursement, picks us up $119,000. And then appropriations increased by $30,000 just for various salary and benefit changes in personnel actions in various departments. So that's just $30,000 additional expense. Highway fund, very minimal changes, just had some changes in benefits there, about $15,000. And then the building fund, facilities director had requested that we increase the 2022 budget by $125,000 to allow him to make repairs to the parking lots on the campus. But generally, the budget totals about $104 million, of using about a little more than $10 million in cash applied. General fund cash applied would be $6.8 million. That's still under our 8% goal for using. Total on the cash applied. I've got highlights here, of for the budget. We're still no additional opt-out dollars are utilized. General fund, again, the cash applied $6.8 million. Using FF&E and funding FF&E in the state's attorney software, or $858,000 through cash applied. Applying about half the cost of the elections using cash applied. Health insurance, again, held at a 15% increase in 2022. Matrix adjustment of 2.5% for all non-elected personnel. And then that's funding 4 new positions as outlined previously. So So I would maybe call your attention to the cash applied analysis, and proposed final budget adjustment sheet. Not sure if you can, that one. This one summarizes the changes that we saw in the general fund, the highway fund, and the building fund. You have one like this. Yeah, it might have been one of your first ones. There we go, that one. Okay. So this kind of in one snapshot summarizes the changes that has happened since the provisional budget. So you can see under the general fund, we have adjustments about 121,000 net for additional revenues. That was made up of the STI reimbursement and the additional revenue for utilities, and then the 30,000 in appropriations basically allows us to reduce the cash applied balance by around $94,000. So for highway, you see very small change there, just around 15,000 in that benefit expense. And then the building fund, we increased the expense there by the $125,000. But still very comfortably within our 8% target for cash applied, and just generally our cash balances are very healthy. If we went on to the other budgets that we had up previously, you could see that all the other budgets were as presented for the provisional budgets, with the exception of the general fund, the highway fund, and the building fund. All the other dollar amounts are unchanged.
Okay.
I guess I'll stop there and look for any questions people might have on the budget.
Commissioner Eberger?
Just a couple of different comments. Thank you, Ben, for all the sheets to go through again. And this is a public hearing, I believe, if there was any comments from the public. But my three different things were, at the joint city meeting and the county meeting, I voted against the Metro Communications one, just because some of the increases that they had in their budget. I have since personally met with Metro management and gone through their budget again and answered some of the questions that I had. They have a large grant funding that's coming in to support 3 new employees in for the next 3 years. That's something that can be reevaluated in 3 years, and if the county decides that those are unnecessary, which I don't think they probably are, those projected expenses going forward can be reviewed again in 3 years. And there are other things too. They did a really good job of walking through a lot of paperwork. So I will not be protesting the Metro when we go forward in September. Another comment I wanted to make is just for your reminder that we did take the Sally Port out of the JDC, out of the building fund, I believe. That was a $300,000 hit. At some point, that Sally Port needs to be done, along with many other things in the JDC. And so I'm anticipating there's some money in the budget for making plans to move forward with how we are going to solve some of those problems with the JDC. I'm not exactly sure what line item that's underneath, but with that $300,000 taken out, whether we have to move some of that more money forward in a current project we're working at the end of the year or what. But there are some significant issues out at the JDC that will need to be addressed. And then also, we have a couple of weeks yet to decide if we need to add any money in for the treasurer's office. Those are my comments.
Okay. Commissioner
I
Barth?
just would have to agree with Cindy. I was thinking about the treasurer's office also, with the encouragement to add some part-time people and to upgrade some technologies. I'd like to see those things happen.
Okay. I guess the only thing I have, and this is directly related, but when it comes to cash applied, we're just taking money out of our piggy bank to make our budget. Have we ever been shown what our anticipated cash applied was versus where we actually ended up with? I mean, do we have an analysis of that for the last several years? We anticipate it, but at the end of the year, for example, 2020,
Yeah, we did, we did an analysis on what we projected our cash applied balance would be into the future.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we've went
And
back.
more of a
and-
historical, we thought we'd spend this much in our piggy bank, but what did we actually spend?
Yeah.
Is what I'm asking, so, you know. And it doesn't have to be done now, but it's just something that, you know, as we're preparing things, if we could look at that just to have a good historical perspective of where do we actually end up at.
Top one. Budget overview? Top one?
Keep going down. What's that? Yeah, oh, yeah, that one and the previous one, I think, are closest to what Commissioner Karski may have been referring to, so. I'm not sure if this is what we were looking for. I know this was what I was thinking about with our projection going out, where we thought we would, might need some opt-out dollars at some point in a couple of years. But I'm not sure that it addresses what you're looking for.
No, I'm just wondering what we budgeted for.
Scroll up one. That one, because that we'll talk about in the year 2020, you budgeted 4.3, but how your cash actually went up. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, we budgeted 4.3, but we didn't spend any of that. In fact, we put more in the piggy bank.
Now, if you go back to 2011, 2012, those charts, you'll notice there was a big dip, because instead of going this way, we went below.
Okay. So for the last several years, we've been adding money to the piggy bank,
Yeah.
not actually spending the money. And I think that's the
Yeah.
point I wanted to make with this, so.
Yeah, and that should be the case in 2021 as well, right? Our revenues are continuing to probably outpace our budget.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Yep.
This is a budget hearing, so if there's anybody here in favor of this budget, I'd like to hear from them. Address the commission. And if there's anybody then not here to speak in favor, is anybody here opposed? Carol, you opposed? Oh.
I'm just going to seek some clarification, because I don't think we're all on the same page, that appraiser and training position, whether or not you guys actually approved that position or not.
Appraiser and training, what do you?
The appraiser and training for equalization. Carrie, do you want to just, I don't think we're all on the same page as to what transpired, so we would ask to revisit.
I believe we don't have it in the budget. Are we thinking we do have it in the budget?
Well, I think we
have The 4 appraiser.
positions, right? Yeah, so the deputy public defender, 2 positions, state's attorney, and 1 appraiser in training.
That might be my error. I think that one's resolved. But we did want to make sure that we revisited Chris's request too in light of it, so I appreciate that you talked a little bit about that. Do you have a decision on whether or not you want to add those funds? Or you want to talk about that yet later for Chris on the part-time?
Has something changed? Why we would want to visit it?
Because of the report that just came out, he suggested that we fill that with 3 part-time positions, a position that she requested, and so we've got till the end of the month to fund it.
But that's the treasurer's office, not the appraiser.
No, the appraiser, I believe, is my error. I was thinking we had not funded it and you wanted to come back and talk about it, but based on this, it looks like it was funded.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much time between now and when Ben needs to finalize this that we have to talk about additional changes.
My comments on the treasurer's position, I think you have.
Microphone.
Sorry. Yes, my comment on the treasurer's position, I think you can take action before the budget's finalized, or you can wait till the end of the year. I think we have the flexibility to do either, right? I don't think there's any hurry to make the decision. The budget's just kind of a roadmap. If you need to make some supplements at the end of the year, that's fine. But how you want to handle it, whether you want to do 3 part-time or differently, I don't think there's any need to necessarily take an action in the final budget.
And until we actually move forward with the plan that was presented by Dr. Tracy and implemented. We don't really know the full implication of where it's going to be. I mean, I'm assuming it could be, but if you're saying that budgetarily, the impact would be, I mean, very well or easily absorbed, I'd say let's move forward with it the way it is, so. Other comments? All right, so I've asked for proponents to the budget. Now I will ask for anyone who's opposed to the budget as presented. So we don't need any rebuttals. And I'm going to do a roll call, or ask for a motion in a second and then do a roll call. Oh, wait. Yeah, this is a hearing.
But there's nothing to pass today. It's just a hearing.
Just a hearing. Okay, because on the 28th, we will
28th,
have it.
we'll accept it.
Never mind. So we don't need a motion or a second. All right. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate the work of you and all your staff. I know a lot of work goes into this, so thank you. All right, we are at liaison reports.
What Bill said.
Okay, got one.
Um,
Commissioner Heiberger.
SDACC's convention is this next week. It starts on Sunday with a golf tournament for, I think about 25 people have signed up. And the attendance to the convention actually looks pretty darn good. It's over 400 people attending this convention, and it's in Rapid City, and it basically is a Monday, Tuesday afternoon through Tuesday afternoon convention, so
And we start Monday morning at 6:30.
7:30.
7:30 our time, 6:30 Rapid City time.
No, 7:30 Rapid City
No,
time,
I'll have to look
6:30.
at it again. I know it's early.
7:30
Okay.
Rapid City time.
All righty. Any others? I met with Bill Early, the new director for the Link, kind of the liaison between the Link board and the Link. Very qualified and outstanding man. Enjoyed our coffee we had last week. I also had lunch with Steve Groen as our new highway super, so I'm excited about the things that he has going on there, as I think a lot of you have also, so, okay. New business, old business. We do have executive session, so I'm going to ask for a recess till 11:30.
Motion to recess.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We'll see you after recess.